So it's a beautiful day in early December 2019 here in North Georgia. And today I'm going to share with you a tale of two cases of classic Porsche M9X engine cylinder bore scoring. So I have two classic cases of cylinder bore scoring represented in the two cars on my flanks here. And with the entire cylinder scoring series, a focus on cylinder bore scoring that we've been sharing here on YouTube, we've tried to take you through the symptoms of cylinder bore scoring, how to avoid cylinder bore scoring, how to try to tackle the problem, even live with the problem if you don't want to tackle it from an internal repair perspective. So with these two cases, and these two classic cases of two cars that are almost exactly the same despite the color of each car, it'll be an absolute perfect comparison between two different engines and how they've exhibited symptoms and how we are going to address these through reconstructions of each of these engines. Now, considering that both of these cars have been delivered here to Flat 6 Innovations for our exclusive service, which basically means we've collected the vehicles, we're going to handle 100% of all the tasks associated with the disassembly, the reconstruction of the engine, all the machining, putting the engine back into the car and testing it, of course, on our chassis dyno. This will be a perfect example of how we're able to resurrect two Porsche Carrera S model engines back to a new stage of life. Now, basically, both of these cars are going to be reconstructed into 4-liter street and track performers, okay? The car here on my right is going to be built into a 4-liter, a standard 4-liter Stage 1 engine. The car on my left is going to be a street performer Stage 2. Now, there's a little bit of difference between these two cars because this car actually has an aftermarket supercharger kit on it. Don't be thinking that that's created a problem, because honestly this engine would have the same issues as this engine even if it didn't have the supercharger. The reason for that is because of inherent issues that lead to cylinder bore scoring. So now I want to familiarize you with all the constants between these two Carrera S models. So as you can see, both cars are cabriolet models. What you can't see is both these cars are the exact same model year. You can see they're both Carrera S models because it says it on the deck lid of each car, which means they're both fitted with the M9701 engine that is found in the Carrera S model at 3.8 liters. Some other things that are constants with these two cars is the mileage. There is only 900 miles of deviation between the odometer readings on both of these cars. Both of them basically are at the 40,000 mile mark. This one's at 41,111 miles. This one's at 42,000 miles, almost dead on the money. So basically we have two classic cases of the same car with the same engine of the same model year with the same exact inherent problem. So people always ask from a mileage perspective, how many miles are on these engines? Because basically a lot of people that are enthusiasts with these cars, they want to hear that these problems are happening at high mileage points. It makes them have a false sense of security sometimes because they think that their 30, 40, 50,000 mile car cannot have a problem. That couldn't be further from the truth. So the silver car here on my right has 41,111 miles on the odometer. It's never been tracked. This vehicle was a one-owner vehicle. The original owner is the only person that has owned this particular car. The car here on my left has just turned 42,000 original miles. it also has never been tracked. All right, so now I want to take you through the characteristics of the particular failures and the way that they were diagnosed with each one of these cars. Let's start with the silver car. So this particular Carrera S was being sold, and the owner was selling the vehicle, and the person who was purchasing the vehicle was a very wise purchaser. Now, a lot of you out there that are viewing our videos are looking for one of these cars, and we see this a lot. I get constant emails about it, constant submission tickets, to the point where we no longer answer them. To be quite honest, we can't. We are basically covered up with the work that we're doing, and we cannot be the guy that tells you which car to buy. So with this car was being sold. The purchaser was a wise purchaser. He was going to have a bore scope inspection done, even though this car had no symptoms of failure. Even though the prior owner or the person who bought the car new and was selling the car had never heard of bore scoring, and the car had no symptoms to him. We actually talked to the seller of the vehicle. He's the one that sent it here. The reason why it was sent here from the seller is because the buyer found that the engine had bore scoring during the invasive type of pre-purchase inspection, which honestly the shop who did that work had watched our videos. They knew what to look for. So the person wasn't able to sell the car. Now, he was a very honest seller. He wasn't like a lot of people who would have just put the car back on the market and sold it to another unsuspecting purchaser because, again, it had zero symptoms. So the way this played out was the buyer certainly wanted to buy a 9971. He took the car to a shop that was local to the seller. They do the invasive inspection, they pull the sump plate off, they find the engine has bore scoring that is confirmed on cylinder 6, and then the buyer no longer wants the car. So the seller decided to ship it here to Flat 6 Innovations. Now, this engine does have confirmed cylinder bore scoring, and I'll throw some video up that we actually collected during our own bore scope inspection of this particular engine. And the reason we did that bore scope inspection is because the engine had no other symptoms. We wanted to make sure that the shop that actually found the bore scoring found something that was legitimate. And we did find the same thing they did conclusively. I'll even throw that on the screen for you. So now let's talk about some of these classic symptoms. First off, you'll want to make sure you've watched all 7 parts of our series, A Focus on Bore Scoring, because if you do that, you will understand all of these traits and all of the symptoms that are classic signs of cylinder bore scoring. Now again, the silver car had none of those. Literally, the person was selling the car, the buyer was smart, he had the PPI done, they found the bore scoring. The car still has no symptoms. I want to get that through your screen now. This car still has no symptoms. This car could have actually fooled me. That's the reason why we went ahead and did our own bore scope inspection of this particular engine. So those classic symptoms are smoking at startup, usually more out of the driver's side tailpipe than the passenger side, sooty tailpipes, either both of them or, again, a more sooty tailpipe on the driver's side than the passenger side. And the reason for that is because the exhaust does make a cross at the back of the car, and you end up having all of the exhaust that comes from the bank 2 of your cylinders, where cylinders 4, 5, and 6 reside, that usually had the bore scoring problem, not always, but usually. That exhaust exits out of the driver's side of the car, okay, because the exhaust does make a cross here at the back of the vehicle. So also, the other symptom that we typically see is oil consumption. This engine had no oil consumption problems at all, okay? And also that classic ticking sound that is confusingly similar to a lifter. And I hear this every week. I get submission tickets. My car has a lifter problem. 4 shops have diagnosed my car with a lifter problem, and it's making it consume oil. No, that is 4 shops that have absolutely no idea how to diagnose a classic bore scoring scenario. So that is the story behind this 41,111 mile original owner case of cylinder bore scoring, okay? Now let's go over to the 42,000 mile car, and let me tell you all of the symptoms and all the things this car has been doing, because it has exhibited a lot of different characteristics than the silver car has. So now, 42,000 miles on this particular black 997.1 Carrera S Cabriolet. And this particular engine did have a lot of symptoms. This car is actually local to us. This car is actually from our county. This is one of the only cars we ever get that's local. Most of our work comes from 1,000 miles or 3,000 miles away, or wherever somebody might be here in North America, even through Canada and also abroad. So it was very unique that this car was so local to us, but the owner of the car didn't even know we existed. He was a classic Porsche owner that doesn't really follow forums. He doesn't do a lot of those things. He started having a problem where the engine was consuming oil, it was smoking a lot at startup, and it was making a classic lifter sound. So he took the car into a local shop, and that's how it ended up here. When we crank this car up here in a few minutes, you'll actually hear the lifter sound, if you will. Don't be fooled, that's a cylinder sound, like we've been able to share with many other videos here on our RenVision channel. Now, this engine had oil consumption. Not a lot. It was burning a quart about every 800 miles, which some people say that's a lot. Well, if you look at the factory specification, this engine from the factory, in the factory directives, it can burn up to a liter in as little as 600 miles, okay? 620 miles is 1,000 kilometers. So basically, the factory directive says that this engine wasn't burning enough oil to be concerned with. The engine also had that classic lifter sound, and it was smoking a lot at startup, especially out of the driver's side exhaust pipe, okay? This one has all the classic symptoms of its engine that has cylinder bore scoring. So the owner was able to find out from a local shop who knew about us the fact that, this is what's going on, and they referred him on over to us. Now, what's unique about this car is that it's had a supercharger for a long time. And we don't see positive things come from aftermarket forced induction kits with these cars. A lot of these kits are absolutely underdeveloped. The enrichment of the ECU is not proper. We're running an engine that's developed for normal aspiration that has a fairly high compression ratio. We're doing that with a supercharger or any kind of turbocharger. Forced induction in these engines over time has proven to us to simply not be something that we want to deal with. So now, as we wrap this particular RenVision technical video up and offer it as a segue into future chapters as we go over both of these engines, which we're actually going to build and process simultaneously here at Flat 6 Innovations. We're going to show you the teardowns, we're going to show you everything about both of these as we're working with them, okay? I just want to say that this car could and would fool anybody that carried out a non-invasive pre-purchase inspection. If you took this car to any shop in this country and they did not do what the shop did that found this, and they did not do what we did, you would not find that this engine has bore scoring. I'll also add, it's fairly advanced, as you saw in the video that we shared with you here, okay? The symptoms simply are masked at this particular time. This car, every classic symptom, supercharger thrown in the mix, okay? So it also runs and drives fine. It does have symptoms, but the owner drove the car here and dropped it off. It does smoke, it does consume oil, and it does make noise, but it also runs fine. So I get that message all the time in my submission tickets, and I'm talking sometimes 5 or 10 times per week in our submission system. And it starts off, I've got this, or I've got that, or I've got this symptom, and my engine runs fine. But what you don't realize is while it's running fine, it's also internally destroying itself, because you have all of the hydrocarbons and all the bad nasty stuff that's happening because of the cylinder bore scoring and the chamber contamination coming from that. It's all lacing the engine oil. You're getting engine oil by the pistons and rings, and you're getting carbon, which, let's remember, is what diamonds are composed of, back inside the oil. So your engine is literally shredding itself apart, and this guy didn't know it. This guy did. So I always talk about superchargers and all this forced induction stuff, and I'm not really big on aftermarket bolt-ons. But in this case, this guy did everything right. He didn't add anything onto his engine, and it had cylinder bore scoring. He maintained it perfectly. He was the original owner. He did everything right, and it still happened to him. This guy bolts on a supercharger. He also keeps it serviced. He has classic symptoms, and it happened to him. Again, 41,000 miles, 42,000 miles. So I want to tell you, there's nothing wrong with these cars. There's a lot wrong with the engines, but these cars are a perfect host to take advantage of a scenario like this. And I say take advantage of it because to someone who truly loves their particular 997 or 996 or Boxster or Cayman or whatever vehicle you have, this is the best failure to have. And these are great cars to own. Other than the engine problems, they don't have any problems. They never have gearbox problems. The convertible tops on the cabriolets don't give problems. They don't have brake problems. They don't have wiring problems. The interiors hold up well. The vehicles have great suspension systems. These are absolutely excellent vehicles that are just fitted with an engine that has inherent issues. And that's one reason why we are so busy and have always been so busy here at Flat Six Innovations, because we create the fix that makes these cars something they can't be any other way. So now I'd like to close this particular Envision technical video by starting each one of these cars up and letting you hear them, okay? And you'll see this one, it sounds like any other 997, any other 996. This one will have a bit of a tick. It's going to come from the passenger side of the vehicle, which is bank 2, okay? This one has confirmed bore scoring on bank 2. This one has confirmed bore scoring on cylinder 6 of bank 2. But again, don't be fooled. You can have bore scoring on all 6 cylinders, or you can have bore scoring just on cylinders 1 through 3. Bore scoring has no prejudice. It can happen to any cylinder at any time in any engine in the M9X family. Okay, so that's a cold start. You can hear the exhaust kind of popping, you know, the typical things that happen with one of these cars when it's first cranked up as everything advances and we're on cold start. But you noticed there was no noticeable smoke out of the tailpipes, and there's also no ticking sound. Now I do have a remote microphone on, so I'm going to kind of stand here so you can hear that this engine is not making any sounds at all. Okay, so now I'm going to start up this supercharged beast. Okay, I got my remote mic out here. Now, since both cars have come off of cold start, they're still cold, they're just off of cold start, I'm going to let you hear kind of the dynamics between each one of these. Okay, so let's start out with a car that does have symptoms. Okay, so basically what you're hearing there is you're really hearing the pistons slapping, right? This is honestly beyond a lifter noise because this one actually has cylinder or piston slap. That's what you're hearing. And when we tear this engine down and we show you that video, I'm gonna move the piston in the bore, and with just me moving it, you'll hear the same sound. But people misdiagnose this all the time. So now I'm going to go to this side. And you see there's not very much there, okay? So now let's go to bank 2 of an engine that doesn't have apparent symptoms, but I know that it has conclusive bore scoring on cylinder 6. And now let's go to the other side. So what this confirms is that cylinder bore scoring can actually be a silent killer. This engine is just as damaged as that one. We can hear this one, it has symptoms. This one is silent, has no symptoms. Both of them are injured just as badly. Both of them are the same year. Both of them are cabriolets, and there's only 900 miles of differential on the odometer between the two cars. Neither car has been tracked. This one's original owner, this one's longtime owner.